Hey students, I need you to close your eyes. I'm going to tell you a story. This is a story that maybe didn't happen, but it could happen. It's a story that you really need to experience in your mind as we tell it. Are you ready? Alright, close your eyes. I'm going to tell you the story of the Gardner family. The Gardner family lives in a mid-sized community in Canada's north. Josh Gardner, the father, is both an artist and a cabinet maker. His fathers lived in the region for as long as he can remember, and they were always woodworkers. Some were loggers, others were builders, and again others were artists like himself, making sculptures and other unique objects out of wood. Josh's wife Muriel is a high school teacher with a passion for berry picking in the fall. The jams and jellies she makes are famous, and she sells some of her stock at the local Christmas craft fair every year. Josh and Muriel have two boys, Declan, who is in grade 11 and can't decide what he wants to do after school, and Pete, who is in grade 9 and wants to be a mechanic. Josh Gardner's business as a cabinet maker and artist was flourishing. In fact, people came from all over the world to buy his art, and he never ran out of building contracts. He advertised his art only on the internet, and the rest was word of mouth, and he never traveled to trade shows. He hated to fly. Luckily for him, he didn't need to fly because people were willing to come to him. Over the years, Josh had been able to employ 3 woodworkers who helped him choose and harvest logs from the forest and did the preliminary work for him. He was proud to be able to provide help to the local economy and to be able to support his family with the work he loved. Now, you know this story is going to have to take a turn. So, things have been going well for the Gardners for many years. Indeed, not only for Josh and his family, but for the many people in the area who made a living one way or another thanks to the resources supplied by the forest. Things had gone so well that most people had overlooked it when their resources started to change. At first, the number of dead trees in the forest had increased slowly, and a few were concerned about it. After all, dead trees were part of the ecosystem, so what was the cause for the dead trees? The spruce beetle. But when the number of dead trees started to increase substantially, some people were getting concerned. Meetings were held, and there was significant controversy as to what should be done about the beetle infestation. Should there be a controlled burn? Should the dead trees be logged to sold in firewood? Should the beetles be killed with pesticides? Josh himself was not sure the best way to address the issue. However, he agreed that the community should thin the forests surrounding its assets in order to reduce the risk for them to be destroyed by wildfire. Some years later, after the first heated debates about how to deal with the beetle infestation had faded, people realized that this infestation was taking on record dimensions. The amount of dead forest around them was overwhelming, and by now, the beetle had eaten himself out of food and was actually on the retreat. Somehow, people relaxed and kind of just got used to the new look of the woods and didn't worry too much about it. After all, there was still enough usable timber around to support most businesses in and around the community, and nature would take care of it, many believed, and would come up with its own solution. And of course, nature did take care of it. One particularly warm spring, after a low snowy year, Pete and his buddies were out having a bush party, celebrating the end of winter and the mild spring temperatures. Pete was now in grade 10 and had bought himself an old beater Honda Civic, which he bragged about while they were sitting around the campfire. When the party was over and the kids left and went home, even though Pete had made sure the campfire was well out when leaving, somehow it kept smoldering. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, a warm wind came up. Guess what happened? The fire was catastrophic, just as some people had foreseen it. It hungrily ate everything in its way, and there was no shortage of food for a fire. With hardly any natural barriers and lots of fuel on the ground, the conditions for a large fire were perfect. By the time the community members realized what was happening, it was far too late. Thankfully, the fire smart work that had been done around the community worked, and very few people lost their homes. But the resource many depended on for their livelihood, such as the Gardner family, was gone. Whether or not the forest would ever recover was questionable, and if it did, it would take decades for it to grow back, way too long for any of the families to be able to wait. After the initial chaos was over and people came back somewhat to their senses, the Gardners and many others were now faced with some tough decisions. So, what do you think the Gardners will do? Consider the options they might have and finish the story. Do you think the community could have prevented this disaster from happening? If yes, how? If no, why not?